This guy right here, I love this guy. This guy is one of the most conceptually unique antagonists I've seen come from anime and manga. He's a character that's honestly unlike anything I've personally seen when it comes to his psychology and how his role within the story is utilized for the benefit of the series thematically and for the benefit of other characters. Currently within the story, this guy is ridden with guilt due to the terrible things he has done in the past. I would call this guy a victim of circumstance. I think this is something you can use to refer to most of Attack on Titan's cast, because many characters in this series are victims of circumstance, but in Reiner's case in particular, Isayama really hammers down this idea. From the very moment he drew breath as a baby, Reiner Braun was a victim of circumstance. You see, Reiner was born in the Liberio internment zone in Mali. This is the place he calls his hometown. He was born from a relationship between an Eldian lady and a Malian man. His birth was the result of a prohibited union, a relationship that was taboo due to the fact that the Eldian people are hated throughout the world for being descendants of Ymir Fritz. A few years go on and it is decided between the young Reiner and his mother that he would become a warrior candidate and potentially inherit one of the 9 titans so that Reiner and his mother could become honorary Malians, thus allowing them to reunite with his estranged father and be a happy family together. This is Reiner's main driving motivation at this point in his life, and as you can see from some instances in the earlier chapters of the series, this is one of his main dreams. This is one of the things he longed for, to go back to his hometown and to be reunited with his family. Reiner had a very difficult upbringing. The only person who loved him in this world was his mother. Everyone else saw him as a worthless coward. Even among the warriors, the people he had to work with, he was seen as frail, weak, and overly unimpressive. His only shining quality in the eyes of the Marleyans was his loyalty to Mali, but this wasn't purely loyalty. This was Reiner's dedication. He was utterly dedicated to coming through on his decision and coming back home to be reunited with his family, and because he wasn't the most skilled or gifted naturally in terms of ability, he had to resort to the only other thing he knew, which is delivering this unwavering loyalty to the people of Mali. After being picked on and antagonized by his peers for a very long time, Reiner was finally chosen to inherit the Armored Titan. This meant he would be going to the island of Paradise and killing people he believed to be devils and to be inherently evil. A lot of Reiner's beliefs about the inherent evil of Eldian people was passed down through his experiences growing up. His mother Karina would feed him Malian propaganda from a very young age. His interaction with his father, who hated him for the mere fact that he carried Eldian blood, further affected his belief that the Eldian people, the people on Paradise, are devils. Reiner was brainwashed from the second he was born, and these experiences on Mali growing up, that is what came together to create the young boy who was fully prepared to do heinous things and to lay waste to Paradise. Skip forward in time a little and it's finally the night where the warriors will embark on their mission to go to the walls, and this is where Reiner's character begins to take a drastic shift. For Reiner, being accepted as a warrior was a sign that he was doing something right, and that living with that consistent rejection and oppression from the Malians would eventually pay off. But then he finds out that he wasn't actually chosen to be a warrior, but was rather forced to join them by Marcel Galliard. This boy would have a massive impact on Reiner's life and character. Till this day, Marcel has an effect on the kind of person Reiner is. You see, Marcel was always kind to Reiner. His younger brother Porco was quite the bully towards Reiner and often antagonized him, but Marcel would always break up their altercations and apologize to Reiner on Porco's behalf. He was one of the only people in Reiner's life that were genuinely considerate toward him, and Reiner saw him as a friend. So that night, the night before they make their journey toward the walls, Marcel breaks down into tears and confesses to Reiner that Reiner wasn't actually chosen to be a warrior, and that the military's decision to give him the power of the Armored Titan was heavily influenced and manipulated by Marcel. He did this for the sake of his younger brother, who he didn't want to put at risk by allowing him to join the warriors on this terrifying mission. Reiner didn't have the time to process this information because the very next day, Marcel, who was the leader of the group, is eaten by a Titan. But what is very key about this is the fact that Marcel died saving Reiner's life. Marcel was the leader, he was the one that would bear the tough decisions, and he took the chief position of the group, so the warriors remaining had just lost their leader and were put in a very ambiguous situation. Annie wants to abandon the mission, Reiner does not. Reiner is arguing that they may all be punished or even executed for their failure, and this is something Annie accuses him of blackmailing them for. Like I said, it's a very ambiguous situation because Reiner himself admits that he isn't sure what he's thinking, and this makes perfect sense. Both Annie and Reiner are children. They're frightened kids who have just watched their leader get eaten alive. And this moment, to me, this is the birth of Reiner's identity crisis, because he, who doesn't know what to do, ends up taking charge of the situation and tells Annie that, if you need Marcel, I will be Marcel. Bear in mind, this is a young boy desperately clinging to the hopes and dreams of a reunion with his family in order to make his mother happy. And what's fantastic about this quote from Reiner is that he didn't mean this simply figuratively. He meant it in a quiet literal sense too. As I'm sure you know, from this moment onwards, Reiner begins to embody that big brother instinct that is derived from Marcel. His initial persona in the very early chapters and seasons of Attack on Titan, that persona is completely derived from Marcel, and that's where his split personality and identity crisis comes from. On one hand, Reiner's just a frightened little boy who is utterly dedicated to this mission for the sake of his dream, whilst on the other hand, Reiner has to play the role of a dependable big brother to the warriors, and skipping forward even more in time, he has to play the role of a dependable older brother to his comrades within the Survey Corps. There's a very real irony in Reiner's character as a member of the Training and Survey Corps. He first joined the Training Corps as a child, living amongst the innocent people whose lives he had just ruined, whose families he had just killed and tormented. Reiner began to slowly learn the truth. He was told and brainwashed by the people of Marley that, in order to save humanity, he must slay the island devils. Like I said earlier, he didn't think there was anything wrong with killing these people. In fact, he thought he was doing a good thing. He thought he was saving humanity. They were terrible, terrible people, and they all deserved to die. So, imagine how it must feel to be proven wrong upon learning the truth. To find out that you are the terrible person in this situation, and that you deserve to die for the things you've done. How would you cope with a moral dilemma this severe? That level of guilt and self-hatred is something I truly find inexplicable, and I cannot tell you how I would react. Reiner was put into such a terrible situation, further reinforcing my point that he is a victim of circumstance, but the way he deals with this is the most fascinating aspect of this. Reiner goes about dealing with this through escapism. Reiner chooses to escape the facts and embody yet another persona. This time the soldier. He spends 5 entire years embodying this persona. It's actually incredibly ironic, because Shadis identifies Reiner as an individual with incredible mental fortitude and willpower. The entire Survey Corps views Reiner as that dependable older brother, that mentally stable, reliable person, when in fact he is mentally and emotionally unstable. He's probably the most insane character in the entire cast of Attack on Titan, and I think that is depicted best in the infamous episode 31 or chapter 42 of Attack on Titan. Reiner chooses to reveal his and Bertholdt's identities to Eren, pretty randomly too. I remember hearing many complaints about how sudden and random this decision was, and that Isayama was just trying to move the plot forward, but it makes perfect sense as to why it happens here. This sudden decision was triggered by Reiner's deteriorating psyche. He had honestly just had enough. He was playing the role of something he was not for 5 entire years and blending with the very people whose lives he had ruined. That overbearing tremendous amount of guilt finally became too much for him, and his crumbling mind frame just snapped. He had to make a decision and choose between his soldier persona and his warrior persona. He chooses the warrior persona and he finally breaks free from insanity. As a matter of fact, I would say that this moment in chapter 42 was good for Reiner mentally. He finally stopped living a lie and chose to continue with his mission. Throughout the entire Clash of the Titans arc, we have numerous interactions which reinforce this notion. It's established that Reiner feels guilty for what he's done, and that he wouldn't have done it if he knew that there were good people inside the walls. But now, what's done is done. That's it. This is the circumstance he has found himself in. He has chosen the path of the warrior, and he will face the consequences of his actions. As I've described, this journey that Reiner's character has gone on, it portrays him as that victim of circumstance. Reiner was an overly eager and innocent little boy who was systematically and thoroughly broken by the world and the terror that comes with it. And that brings us to chapter 97. Reiner is reminiscing and reflecting on his painful past and the days he spent in paradise. He's watching Gabi and Falco training, as well as realizing that one day he will have to return to paradise and potentially relive that terribly painful past. Reiner cannot handle that thought, and it drives him to his breaking point, forcing him to put a loaded rifle in his mouth. That's it, he's gonna blow his brains out and kill himself. Just as his finger is on the trigger and he's about to pull, Falco happens to pass by the room and unknowingly inspires Reiner to continue living. See, Reiner, he's by far the most battered and tragic character in Attack on Titan, at least mentally. I'd say there are a few characters who you could compare to Reiner in terms of tragedy and what they've gone through, but when it comes to mental fragility, Reiner is without a doubt the most troubled. His experiences have made him suicidal, but the universe persists on forcing him to survive by throwing new things at him. This time, in chapter 97, the universe concludes that Reiner must live for the sake of Falco and Gabi, for the sake of the kids. He is still suicidal. Reiner genuinely doesn't want to live. There's still so many instances throughout the last couple of arcs that show us Reiner wants to die. He has had enough of this world. But due to the circumstances he has found himself in, he must cling on to life. So now that we've come to the end of the video, what do you think the point of everything was? Why did I just spend 12 minutes talking about how Reiner is a victim of circumstance? I'd say the main point of me making this video and analysis is to show you guys how Isayama, through a single character, portrays the harshness and brutality of humanity. How cruel, unsympathetic, and self-serving humanity can be. How an innocent child can be brainwashed and exploited to do terrible, terrible things and end up wanting to kill themselves due to that. How characters in Attack on Titan are all victims of circumstance in some way, shape, or form. How Isayama uses mindless flesh-eating titans to portray innocence and uses humanity to portray evil. Now, before I end this short video, I do want to say, check out Sol's video on the topic of Eren and Reiner where he analyzes their character dynamic. I'll put a link to it in the description, and I definitely plan on analyzing their dynamic at some point on this channel, but in the meantime, make sure you check that out. It's a little outdated and some of the recent chapters of the manga definitely provide more talking points. Before its release date, Sol does an absolutely brilliant analysis on Eren and Reiner's wonderfully layered character dynamic. It's honestly fantastic, so make sure you check that out. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think of Reiner, this analysis, and the direction Attack on Titan's currently going in the comment section down below. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more Attack on Titan on the channel. I have been Fiji. Peace.